be talking about symbols in Scripture, and more particularly the ones that God uses for the house of Israel. Often the Lord will use a repeated symbol to teach a concept because symbols just carry so much more information. I'll give you an example in our day. People use the term Cinderella team, and they use that because of the story of Cinderella, and that whole story can be condensed into this term, the Cinderella team, meaning a team that no one expects anything from that ends up winning it all. You can pack so much information, whole stories or situations by using keywords or symbols. In fact, the Lord does this all the time throughout the Scriptures. He uses symbols such as the brazen serpent, the Liahona, the tree of life, the Ark of the Covenant, living water, or the armor of God. You just have to say one of those phrases and it'll remind the reader of this whole story, this whole situation, and then add new meaning and depth to the current situation or the current thing that the author is talking about. And so today I've created these 3 short slides to talk about the house of Israel, symbols and their meanings before we tackle 1 Nephi 21, as these symbols are a very heavy part of this Isaiah chapter in the Book of Mormon. So here we go. Okay, as we begin, remember that the Scriptures are about God's dealings with man on the earth throughout all of human history, what has happened and what will happen to us. And many of those Scriptures discuss the house of Israel because it has a very vital part in the history of mankind and God's dealings with us here on the earth. And of course, the house of Israel is the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is a righteous line of people who the Lord will use to bless all the nations of the earth. That was a promise made in the Old Testament and reiterated in all books of Scripture. One of the main symbols that the Lord uses to describe the house of Israel is He calls the house of Israel a woman or a bride. And He talks about the fact that this woman, this bride, has made sacred covenants to the Lord on Mount Sinai. This was after the Lord took them out of bondage in Egypt, and He brought them across the Red Sea and had Moses take them to this mountain, the sacred mountain, Mount Sinai. And there they promised God that they would keep the 10 Commandments, that they would keep any of His laws and statutes that He would bring to them. And they also were promised by the Lord that they would become a peculiar treasure, a holy nation, a kingdom of great people unto Him. Now these covenants were as serious to God as marriage covenants are. In fact, that's why He calls the house of Israel a bride. We live in a society where marriage is not looked at as very binding, but to God, marriage is really sacred. In fact, it's the place where you bind your hopes, your dreams, your destiny, your children, and your future care and concern with this other person. And this is what these people in the house of Israel were doing with their covenants to God. They were binding up their lives with their God. And should this covenant be broken, serious consequences would ensue. And they knew this going into the covenant. And so what happens is the Lord then brings these people into the promised land. And the Scriptures say that this land is flowing with milk and honey. This is the place that He has covenanted and promised their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that they would be able to be led to and live in. And it is the land of great conflict in our day that we know of as Israel or Palestine, the Holy Land. So after a period of a few hundred years, the people began to break the covenants that they had made with God. They began to not follow His commandments. They began to replace His laws with laws and rules of their own making. And that they would do this was foretold by prophets in the scriptures, and the consequence would be that they would be carried off into bondage and scattered. This is called the scattering of Israel. We know that the 10 tribes were taken off and lost, and we know that different people were scattered around the world, and that Judah was also scattered and brought back at different times and then scattered again. So we'll go into a lot of detail about that in future sessions. Okay, and so every time that a prophet prophesied about the Israel becoming wicked and being scattered, there was also this absolutely amazing great promise that was attached to that warning. And that promise shows the absolute mercy and kindness and love of the Lord. And I mean, honestly, I just can't get over how amazing he is. This is the great promise that, like a faithful spouse who will forgive and bring back the spouse who has been unfaithful and untrue, the Lord has made this promise that he will bring back Israel, and Israel will take its place once again as his devoted, symbolic spouse. And this, of course, is called the Gathering of Israel, or the Great Gathering. And this is one of the major themes of the scriptures. And this great gathering, will happen, according to the scriptures, in the last days. Other terms for the last days are in the scriptures are the latter days, the times of refreshing, the restoration of all things, and the dispensation of the fullness of times. Now, this time period will take place before the millennium, the resurrection, and judgment day. And according to the scriptures, this is when he will fulfill his promise that the Lord will use the house of Israel to bless the whole earth. And the house of Israel, according to the scriptures, will put on her beautiful garments, her strength. She will become the symbolic bride to the bridegroom who is coming for the great millennial day. It's a really beautiful story. And as I said before, a very important puzzle piece to understand to help unlock a lot of Isaiah's writings and the writings that are throughout the scriptures. If you want to search out this topic a little bit more, here's some Old and New Testament writings about this concept, these ideas that you're welcome to study. I hope that you enjoyed studying this little symbolism about the house of Israel, or Zion, as she is also called in the last days, and how she's represented as a bride or as a woman. And if you take that and move into the next section, which is 1 Nephi 21, hopefully that'll give you some background for this next section that we're going to study. Have a great day. Thank you so much.